This video is going to be my complete review of the Niner RKT 9 RDO. I did a first look and a couple interim reviews. This one will be a standalone review going over the whole bike. The RKT 9 is Niner's full suspension cross-country bike. It replaces the Jet 9 RDO. The Jet 9 has become more of a trail bike with increased travel. So this is the cross-country bike. This one comes stock with 100 millimeters of travel up front and 90 millimeters of travel in the rear. I've kept this bike mainly stock. This is the 4-star build. I did make some modifications in the wheels and the handlebar, which I'll show when I go over the components. So let's get into it. This bike weighs 22.9 pounds the way I have it set up. Again, it's the 4-star build with a few modifications. So let me go over those before I go over the rest of the components. I put on a set of Stan's Valor wheels simply because I had these on my Anthem 27.5. Absolutely love the wheels. I really like the way they have some compliance when you hit a bump, but also are very stiff laterally. I'll show the stock wheels that come with the 4-star build in case you're interested in that build. The stock wheels look really good. They're a carbon wheel with the Stan's bead socket technology, but again, I'm so familiar with these wheels, I didn't want to take any chances, so I put these on. I also put on a pair of Schwalbe Rocket Ron tires. This bike comes stock with Maxxis icons, but I love the way the Rocket Rons handle on my local trails. When you start to slide a little bit, they really catch, they really handle the sharp type corners that we have on my local trails, so that's why I put these on. They also do very well as tubeless. I also put on an Ultegra cassette. I have the stock cassette. It comes stock with a Shimano XT 1146, so a pretty wide range. I don't need that wide of a range on my local trails. I'll use the stock ones when I head up to steeper terrain up in the mountains, but this is an 1132, so 32 is all I need for my local trails. We do have some short, steeper climbs, but nothing real long, so because the bike is so light, I can get away with that gearing. The 1146 is about maybe 150 grams heavier, so I've dropped over 1/4 pound off this bike by putting on the Ultegra cassette. The other thing I like about the Ultegra cassette is there's less of a gap between cogs, so I'm able to more find that precise gear as I'm riding, especially on the road. And speaking of riding on the road, I can get up to about 25 miles an hour before I start to spin out this bike. Also, I did change out the handlebar. I really like a riser bar. It came stock with a Niner flat bar or carbon bar. I don't think I really shaved any weight off the bike, but I like the back sweep and bend of a riser bar, and I'm running my stem flatter. So instead of having a little bit of a rise to it, it's run flat because of how tall the bike sits with 29-inch wheels. I'm still able to run the flat bar at a pretty decent height if I flip that stem around to a flat or negative rise. I am running Shimano XT pedals on this bike, and when I weighed the bike at the 22.9 pounds, I did weigh it with these XT pedals. These are the stock wheels that come with the 4-star build. Really nice. They got a DT Swiss 350 hub, and they come with rim tape, valve stem, and fluid so that you can go tubeless. I think I'd mentioned that they do come with Stan's bead socket technology, so they lock in the bead of the tire really well for tubeless. So that's Niner's carbon cross-country wheel that comes with this bike in the 4-star build. Also in the 4-star build, you get the Maxxis icon tires. It has a 2.35 for the front and a 2.2 in the back, which is a nice combination. You get the bigger, plusher, beefier tire in the front for more traction, and the more agile 2.2 in the back. Since I just mentioned the rear gearing, let me say that the front gearing is a 32. This is obviously a 1x system, so no front derailleur. And the 32 is a narrow wide chainring. And this is a race face turbine crankset. Really stiff crankset. I've used race face front chainrings in the past and really like them. So I'm really happy with this. It is a press fit 30 bottom bracket. So like it or love it, it does allow for a pretty stiff bottom bracket, really fat bottom bracket. So I don't mind press fit. I know some people say they have creaking issues. I've not had any creaking issues at all with this bottom bracket. Continuing on with a few of the component highlights. The saddle on this bike is Niner's house brand, but it is a really comfortable saddle. I've used this on my gravel bike on 6-hour rides, and it's very comfortable, has an anatomical cutout. The seat post is Niner's RDO seat post, which is carbon, and it's designed to have a little bit of a flex to it. So it adds to the comfort of the bike. So a little bit of a give. I've used one of these even on a hardtail, and it does work. It does flex a little bit, and it's also very light. As far as the drivetrain, I already mentioned the cassette and the cranks. It does come with Shimano XT rear derailleur and shifters. So this is the clutch style rear derailleur and really reduces chain slap. I love XT components. They're light, they're solid, they work great. I will say that the cables that came on this bike, it came with Jaguar cables, and I had some friction issues. I use my normal grease, so I don't know if the Jaguar cables just didn't like that grease, but I had too much friction, so I just got some plain old cables from the bike shop, changed them out, and that solved my friction issues. So I mentioned it does come with Shimano XT shifter. One thing I like about this is it's designed to use one clamp, so the rear brake and the rear shifter both use the same clamp, which reduces clutter on the handlebars. XT brakes are so solid. My favorite brakes on a mountain bike. They're easy to work on. They have great modulation. That means you can really get just a little bit of power, medium power, lots of power in these brakes, and they're very powerful. Niner did put a 180 front rotor on this bike. If I would have built this up, I probably would have done a 160 just because of my weight and the typical terrain that I ride. But the 180 works, it's very powerful, and when I get up in the mountains and ride this bike, it's obviously going to have plenty of power. And of course the rear is a 160, and that's pretty standard. Suspension on this bike is handled by Fox, which is my preferred suspension by far. And this is the new Fox Stepcast fork. This also helps keep the weight of this bike really low. The new Stepcast cross-country forks drop about half a pound over the traditional Fox forks, and Stepcast is only available in 100 millimeters of travel. I did a complete review on this fork if you want to go back and watch it. The only concern that I have, I did mention that in the review, is the maintenance. I have not changed the oil yet in this fork, and the nuts are way up inside, so I don't know how easy this thing is going to be to work on, but performance is great. Works just as well as previous Fox forks, which is really good. Of course, dropping the weight. Comes with a Kashima coating, which really reduces stiction on the fork, as with the shock as well. So the rear shock on this is actually one with a remote lockout. So let me talk about that for a minute, because when I first got this bike, I really wished that Niner had used the regular DPS rear shock, but this remote lockout has been something that I have come to love. And I've changed my tune about this remote lockout. So the way this works is, this is your button to make it firmer. So that's the middle setting. That's locked out. When I say locked out, it's fully locked out. That's a setting I only use on the road, or maybe on a steep, out of the saddle hard effort. I may completely lock it out, but rarely do I do that. And then to release it, you go all the way to the fully open position. So if you want to go from fully locked out to middle, you have to fully release it and then go to the middle. The reason that I've come to love this shock is I will open it up fully on descents, and it gives such a supple, plush feeling to this bike. It makes it feel like it has more than the 90 millimeters of travel that it does have. And I use it all the time, probably as much as I would use a dropper seat post on a trail bike. The only complaint that I do have is that sometimes when you're in the middle setting and you want to release it to fully open, the lever in the back will kind of hang up. So it will stick a little bit. Now it's not doing it for the video here, of course, but sometimes it'll hang up and not go to the fully open position until you hit a couple bumps, and then it kind of jiggles loose. Not a big deal. I did change out the cable on this as well from the Jaguar that came with it, and that helped that issue a lot, but it's just something that you got to be aware about. Sometimes what I'll do is, if I want to go to fully open from the middle position, I will go to locked out real quick and then open it up, and that inertia will throw it past that stiction point. So it's really not that big of an issue. Again, it's something that I've just come to love on this bike, and I use it all the time. Of course, this bike does use Niner CVA suspension, which is a virtual pivot style suspension similar to Santa Cruz, similar to Giant's Maestro. This is my favorite type of suspension. The virtual pivot suspensions like the CVA will be firm when you need it to be. In other words, when you're pedaling hard, it'll firm up, and when you stop pedaling, it becomes very active. It does not suffer from brake jacking, and by brake jacking I mean when you are going down a hill and you slam on the rear brake, the suspension does not stiffen up. And so it's a really nice suspension design, really supple, really smooth. Again, opening that shock up to fully open helps this suspension just use its travel so well. And so again, a really plush riding bike, only 90 millimeters of travel, but again, I really feel like when the shock is open, it has more than that. So that's a very good thing. Now I will say that this suspension, there are times when I forget to leave the shock in the middle setting. So I'll use the open setting on a descent, and sometimes I'll actually forget to put it back in the middle setting, which is where I prefer to keep it when I'm pedaling hard. However, even when I do that, the suspension is firm. So I was riding yesterday and did a few climbs and looked down and realized the shock was in the fully open position. So that's how good this suspension is. It really stiffens up when you need it to. This bike comes with the new boost spacing in the front and the rear. So instead of 100 millimeter width in the front, it's got 110, which adds to the stiffness of the front end. And the back has a 148 boost rear spacing. Boost spacing not only increases the stiffness of the bike, it also allows bike manufacturers to use shorter chainstays. And to me, that is the magic of the new 29ers that are coming out. They have shorter chainstays, which allow them to handle very well. Up until this bike, I could not find a full suspension 29er that handled the way I wanted it to. And that's why I've been on 27.5 for a couple years. This is the first full suspension 29er that has the agility that I'm looking for on my local trails. When I'm going around corners on this bike, I feel like the rear end tracks with the front end. It doesn't lag behind. Another thing that I like to do when I'm coming into corners is weight the front brake pretty hard when I'm setting up for the corner. That lightens up the rear end and allows me to whip the rear end around the corner, and makes for a bike that is just super fun to ride. This is the first full suspension 29er that I actually just get a big smile on my face when I'm railing corners going back and forth. The head angle on this bike is fairly steep, and it may be a little bit twitchy for some people, so it takes some attention when you're riding it. But the good thing about it is it allows this bike to get around tight corners very, very well. Now the good thing about 29ers is the faster that you go, the more stability you have from the inertia of the wheels as compared to a 27.5 or a 26er. So that kind of adds to the stability of the bike and a little bit overcomes the steep head angle at faster speeds. However, if you're riding up in the mountains, steep descents that are rocky and sketchy, this bike could be a little twitchy. Now you do have the option of running a 120 fork, but with a stock fork, it could be a little bit twitchy for some people. It's something that you're just going to have to consider if the 100 fork is right for you. For me, I love it. I love it on my local trails. This bike is like a sport bike on the trails. Just the way it corners, the way it goes back and forth between, you know, a left turn, right turn, left. You're just handling the bike, throwing it around. So I really feel like Niner has dialed in the geometry on this bike. Again, the 17.3 inch chainstays really, really help with the handling of the bike. I would say the target audience for this bike is someone who just absolutely wants to go fast on a mountain bike, and you need full suspension. I'm a full suspension guy. I go faster on full suspension. I have more fun on full suspension. So if you're a racer, this is a bike that you can go super fast on. If you're not a racer, but just enjoy going fast on a mountain bike, this is a bike you should really look at. If you're more of a trail rider, you do race from time to time, but you ride more technical, steep terrain, and you want a bike that's still fairly light, I would consider the Jet 9 RDO. Like I said in the beginning of the video, they did increase the travel on that, so it's a little bit more capable as a trail bike. Also, the nice thing about the Jet 9 RDO is you have the option of running 27.5 plus tires. On this bike, you cannot do that because of the width of the seat stays in the back and the chain stays just a little bit too narrow. So you're really stuck with 29-inch wheels. You cannot go 27.5 plus on this bike. But for me, that's not a big issue. The two words that I can use to sum up the RKT 9 RDO are fun and fast. This is a bike that I've actually beat many of my Strava times that have not been able to beat for many years. In fact, one of them was set by a pro rider. It was relatively short, maybe about 3 minutes, but I've been trying for a couple years. Even on my Anthem, I was not able to get it. I finally got it on the Niner RKT 9. The stiffness, the amount of travel on this bike, and just the lightness of the bike make this thing so fun to ride. If you wanted a bike that was still fast but a little bit more stable on rough descents, you could put a 120 millimeter fork on this bike. It is designed to run a 120 if you wanted to. Again, that's going to slacken the head angle, make the bike a little bit less agile on the tight, slower stuff, but it's going to make it a little bit more stable on the descents. So Niner is more of a boutique brand, so this is not a cheap bike. This is one that you need to make a commitment on. Now, Niner is a company that also has very good customer service. So yes, you're paying a little bit more, but you're buying into a company that's really committed to mountain biking and has really good customer service. So I'll wrap it up with that. And if you have any questions or comments about anything I've said in the video, please leave them below and I'll try to get to them. Thanks for watching.